So I wanted to ask more about, you have this sense from the last couple of decades on projects, opportunities that the government will either slow roll or move heaven and earth to make reality. Tell me more about how you can, like, how you've developed that sense, what differentiates those two things. I mean, often as an early stage investor, every founder says their thing is amazing and they're like, look at this huge pipeline and all of these use cases and all of these grants that we have earned. Like, tell me more about how you suss out a signal from noise in the midst of those pitches.
That is a really good question. So how do you suss out signal from noise when considering where to invest in dual use technologies? I think the answer to that is you have to follow the money. The government releases public information on what their budget and priorities are. The closer you are to DC and the networks they're in, the more insight you have into that native information. So while from the outside, it may seem like the government's going to do everything and everything in between to get to the capabilities that they want and need yesterday, the government is not that efficient. And I think that investors, both new and old, know this to varying degrees of insight and experience and perceive the government market as extremely high friction. I think that's why we haven't seen a lot of firms stand up in this space, VC firms specifically, because outside looking in, you're not sure how to underwrite the space. Just because you have somebody who left the government and says the government needs this, they're going to buy it from me, I'm going to build it, why don't you fund it, does not mean that any of that is true. So how do you determine what's true? Outside of the shameless plug of, well, you invest with a firm like mine, really you do need some sort of insight. And I think that goes back to the statement of follow the money, not the VC money, but the government money. And the government money doesn't always track the stated budget. And really, you do need some sort of experiential insight and community touch point to let you know the government sets the budget, but people execute it. So finding the people within the government that want and need to buy capability and people that have funding and aligning those two things is a different skill set that exists only in the DC area naturally. And that's really, I think, where you can get a sense of what the priorities are. You need to know a little bit more about the customers themselves. It's no different than a commercial market where you need to know the customer, their buying behavior, non-consumption that can be engaged in to generate a new customer. But you do have to conduct significant operations to discover that information and make those things happen, no matter if you're on the commercial or the government side of things. So from specifically the government lens, it's lobbying, right? Follow the money, look for those operations that are happening. And, you can underwrite on those types of funding priorities, but you need a little bit of insider access and information.
A quick note before we continue the conversation. Alongside the Diligent Observer podcast and newsletter, I also run an outsourced operations service specifically built to serve angel networks. My team handles things like initial screening, social media, newsletter prep, platform management, and a whole lot more. The kinds of things that either aren't getting done or shouldn't be done by busy community leaders. If that sounds interesting to you, send me a note. Now, back to it. So when you say follow the money, expand a bit more on that, because oftentimes, every founder, when they're pitching, let's say it's a seed stage deal, just as an example, seed, maybe early Series A, they've got some SBIR or STTR funding, and they seem to have that all figured out. How do you, what does it mean when you say follow the money? How do I do that?
Yeah, I mean, the SBIRs are interesting, right? Because that non-dilutive funding piece can also just not really go anywhere. It's a regulated industry, right? So government, the dual use piece of this, right? If you're working to sell to the government, it is an industry that's regulated, obviously, that comes with its own rule set. And I think that you do need slightly experienced navigator to be able to suss out what's real and what isn't. You kind of asked that before. Look at SBIRs, right? If you get a phase 1 SBIR, that doesn't mean that you're going to get a phase 2 or a phase 3. So if you looked at a company from the commercial side as a generalist and said, wow, they're making 10 grand a month. That seems like a wedge. They're set to expand. Other customers might want their solution after they continue to iterate this. I could see this is on path to becoming a $500,000 a year revenue company pretty easily, given how quickly they got there. That could all just be wrong because they could just have a phase 1 SBIR that's paying them to do research that never produces a customer and never produces lasting revenue. And again, take that back to the commercial side. That's kind of your idea of churn. Is customer A the same as customer B? And how long do they stick around? And how much did it cost to acquire that customer? And what's your lifetime value of that customer? All the business school stuff, right? That enables the financiers of venture capital to make money on a model, systematically. Same thing on the other side of the equation. You gotta ask questions, right? A customer is a customer is a customer, but not all customers are the same.
Okay, dumb question. I've always said SBIR. Is it SBIR? Have I been wrong my whole life?
It's SBIR.
It's SBIR. I've been wrong.
In DC, I've never heard anybody not say SBIR. But the government's so full of acronyms that I'm probably pronouncing half of them wrong anyway. I've been here.
That's why I'm talking to you, because I sit in Texas and have no idea what's going on over here. SBIR, got it. What's the other one? STTR. It's not. That's probably wrong.
We'll just usually say
Sitter?
STTR. I've never heard anybody say sitter.
Oh,
go figure. Right.
This is how it goes.
I think most times people say SBIR and they lump the STTRs in there, and they just go with that instead of saying SBIR soda.
Makes sense. Are there other programs or initiatives that you pay particular attention to beyond those?
This is the government has had the ability and authority to conduct contracting operations differently for a long time. They're just leaning into it really hard right now and changing some of the old rules, looking for more flexibility. That is difficult to do. It's difficult to change regulation structure once it's put in place, right? Usually it was put in place for a reason, but specifically relative to, are there other, opportunity vehicles and or vectors for innovation with and through the government? Absolutely. You have other transaction authorities, commercial solution openings, things of this nature that are designed to vector outside capabilities into the government. The government in all agencies, it's full of people of varying degrees of understanding as to what they are allowed to do and what industry is capable of and how to bring those things in. There's a lot of people involved. I would use the phrase, it takes a village, but that seems, kind of lame here because not everybody's working together either, right? So it kind of goes back to the follow the money thing. Different pots of money floating around, and they don't always like to be combined. And you'll have two different pots of money trying to do the same thing with different people. Almost, I guess there's an analogy to be made there that almost seems like competing, VCs, right? But not quite fair to say, but the concept is there.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew, and if you're an angel investor looking for essential angel intel in 5 minutes every week, I think you'd enjoy my newsletter. I send my best stuff, interesting deals, and more straight to your inbox so you never miss a thing. Subscribe today at thediligentobserver.com.